Tonight we begin with a development that White House officials, Pentagon strategists, and intelligence analysts monitoring the Black Sea theater had observed, assessed, and rapidly mobilized to support. A development that unfolded not over weeks of diplomatic coordination, but in 84 hours. 84 hours that broke Russia's naval stranglehold on Ukraine's southern coast. 84 hours that sent the Kremlin into what sources describe as barely controlled crisis management. 84 hours that triggered the largest single American military aid package to Ukraine since the invasion began. What President Zelensky announced from Odessa this morning crossed a threshold that Moscow had declared was protected by Russian naval supremacy, by coastal defense systems, by military capability Ukraine supposedly could never match. And when that threshold broke, the Trump administration did not respond with cautious deliberation. They responded with a $12.7 billion weapons transfer that defense officials are calling unprecedented in both scale and speed. Tonight, we're going to break down exactly what happened, why it matters, and what it tells us about America's commitment to Ukrainian victory. Because what you're about to hear isn't just another aid announcement. It's evidence that Washington has decided Ukraine's Black Sea breakthrough creates a strategic opportunity too significant to miss. For months now, there had been signals, not public Ukrainian declarations about Black Sea operations, not official announcements about naval capabilities, just signals that Ukrainian forces were preparing something transformative in the maritime domain. Intelligence analysts who monitor Ukrainian naval preparations know the indicators: the accumulation of anti-ship missiles at coastal positions, the increased coordination with Western satellite surveillance of Russian fleet movements, the integration of naval drone units into combined operations planning. These are the patterns that precede major naval engagements. But what set off alarm bells at the Pentagon 3 weeks ago was that the pattern went silent. The missile movements stopped appearing in intelligence reporting. The satellite coordination requests went dark. The naval drone activity disappeared from monitoring channels. All of that went quiet. And whenever Ukrainian Black Sea operations go quiet, it means the Russian Navy is about to face something it cannot stop. Early Sunday morning, sources speaking with multiple outlets under strict conditions of anonymity detected what they described as a catastrophic collapse of Russian naval control over the northwestern Black Sea. According to intelligence officials familiar with the operations, Ukrainian forces conducted coordinated strikes against the Russian Black Sea fleet that began at 3:47 a.m. and continued for 7 hours, employing anti-ship missiles, naval drones, and precision-guided munitions, in what military analysts are calling the most sophisticated naval operation Ukraine has conducted since the invasion began. Here's what we know at this hour. The operation was not a single lucky strike. It was not opportunistic targeting of isolated vessels. It was not a limited demonstration of capability. It was a comprehensive assault designed to eliminate Russian naval presence in waters that Moscow had controlled since occupying Crimea, waters that Russia used to blockade Ukrainian ports and threaten civilian shipping. What makes this operation extraordinary is not just its success, but its ambition and execution. Officials briefed on the intelligence say Ukrainian forces struck 9 separate Russian vessels over the 7-hour engagement window, sinking 4 warships, severely damaging 3 others, and forcing 2 to retreat under emergency power to Sevastopol, with fires still burning. According to defense officials familiar with the operational details, Ukrainian anti-ship missiles destroyed a Russian Admiral Grigorovich-class frigate at 4:23 a.m., hitting the vessel with multiple precision strikes that intelligence analysts say caused catastrophic ammunition explosions. Satellite imagery confirmed the frigate sank within 18 minutes, becoming the largest Russian warship Ukraine has destroyed in the entire conflict. But that was just the opening move. Ukrainian naval drone units struck 2 Russian Buyan-class corvettes at 5:47 a.m., vessels that had been conducting operations to enforce Russia's illegal blockade of Ukrainian grain exports. According to sources familiar with the intelligence, both corvettes suffered severe damage below the waterline and required emergency towing to port. One of the vessels, satellite imagery confirms, capsized during the towing operation and is now sitting on the bottom of Sevastopol harbor. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces destroyed a Russian Rapucha-class landing ship that intelligence analysts say was preparing to support potential amphibious operations against Ukrainian coastal positions. The landing ship, struck by Ukrainian missiles at 6:34 a.m., burned for 4 hours before sinking, taking with it military equipment and supplies that Russian forces will not be able to replace. The statement from President Zelensky was not normal. It was not delivered from Kyiv in carefully measured diplomatic language. It was broadcast from the Odessa waterfront at 11:47 a.m., with the Black Sea visible behind him, with Ukrainian flags flying at liberated port facilities, with a message that was both defiant and declarative. Zelensky announced that Ukrainian forces had achieved what he called absolute naval superiority in the northwestern Black Sea, that Russian vessels no longer operate in Ukrainian waters, that the illegal blockade preventing grain exports had been broken permanently. The statement confirmed that Ukrainian naval operations had destroyed or disabled multiple Russian warships, described the operation as liberation of Ukraine's maritime sovereignty, and indicated that Ukrainian forces would ensure safe passage for civilian shipping through corridors that Russia can no longer threaten. What happened next is where this story becomes even more significant for Ukraine's strategic position. Within 6 hours of Zelensky's Odessa address, the White House convened an emergency National Security Council meeting that included President Trump, the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and the Director of National Intelligence. According to sources familiar with the discussion, Trump opened the meeting by asking a single question: what does Ukraine need to capitalize on this breakthrough? The answer, officials say, came back immediately and unanimously: everything. At 8:47 p.m. Sunday evening, President Trump personally authorized a military aid package totaling $12.7 billion, the largest single transfer to Ukraine in the war's history. According to administration officials speaking under conditions of anonymity, the package includes advanced air defense systems, long-range precision missiles, armored vehicles, artillery systems, ammunition stockpiles, and naval defense capabilities that will enable Ukraine to defend its reclaimed maritime territory against any Russian attempt at reconquest. But here's what makes this aid package unprecedented beyond just its size. Sources briefed on the authorization say Trump ordered the Pentagon to execute the transfer on an emergency basis, waiving normal procurement timelines and directing that weapon systems begin flowing to Ukraine within 72 hours, rather than the months that typical aid packages require. The directive, according to officials familiar with the order, specifically instructs the Defense Department to prioritize speed over process to ensure Ukrainian forces receive capabilities while the strategic window remains open. This is not bureaucratic aid distribution. This is wartime logistics at maximum urgency. Intelligence analysts monitoring the Kremlin's response to Ukraine's Black Sea victory detected what one official described as complete operational panic. Russian naval commanders were reporting to Moscow that the Black Sea Fleet had suffered its most significant losses since World War II, that remaining vessels were vulnerable to Ukrainian attack, that Russian naval operations could no longer be conducted in the northwestern Black Sea without unacceptable risk. But what really sent the Kremlin into crisis mode was the intelligence confirmed by multiple sources that Ukraine's naval strikes were enabled by real-time targeting intelligence from American satellites and NATO surveillance aircraft. Russian officials intercepted by Western intelligence services were not discussing how to defend against Ukrainian attacks. They were discussing whether any Russian naval operations remained viable against an adversary with access to alliance-level intelligence architecture. That is not a military assessing tactical adjustments. That is a military acknowledging strategic defeat. When Putin finally responded to the Black Sea losses, he responded not with military counteraction, but with emergency consultations seeking any international intervention that might prevent further Ukrainian advances. According to intercepted communications, Putin personally called leaders in Beijing and New Delhi, requesting they pressure Ukraine to halt Black Sea operations, claiming that continued Ukrainian naval success threatened regional stability. The responses Putin received, according to intelligence officials familiar with the communications, were diplomatic but clear. Russia created this situation by invading Ukraine. Russia must deal with the consequences. International support for halting Ukrainian liberation of occupied territories is not forthcoming. Putin is isolated. His threats are ignored. His requests for help are politely declined, and his military is losing control of strategic positions faster than Moscow can formulate responses. Ukraine did not wait for Russian diplomatic efforts to gain traction. Ukrainian forces exploited. By Monday afternoon, Ukrainian naval forces had established what officials describe as secure maritime corridors through previously blockaded waters. The first civilian cargo vessel departed Odessa port at 2:34 p.m. Monday, carrying Ukrainian grain exports that Russian blockade had prevented for months. According to Ukrainian officials, the vessel sailed without Russian harassment, without missile threats, without any indication that Russian naval forces were willing or able to interfere. Meanwhile, Ukrainian coastal defense units began establishing positions on previously contested Black Sea islands that Russian forces had occupied early in the invasion. Intelligence analysts say these positions will provide Ukrainian forces with radar coverage and firing positions that extend Ukraine's anti-ship missile range even deeper into waters Russia once controlled. But the operation that truly demonstrates the strategic significance of Ukraine's Black Sea breakthrough occurred Tuesday morning when Ukrainian forces reopened a second major port facility that had been closed since February 2022. The port, which handles industrial exports critical to Ukraine's economy, resumed operations at 9:17 a.m. Tuesday with cargo loading operations that Ukrainian officials say represent the restoration of economic capabilities Russian aggression was designed to destroy. These weren't random achievements. These were calculated operations designed to restore Ukrainian economic sovereignty, to demonstrate that Russian blockade has failed, to show that Ukraine can defend its maritime territory against the Russian Navy. What makes these operations especially significant is what they reveal about the complete collapse of Russian naval strategy and the sophistication of Ukrainian maritime warfare. The Russian Black Sea fleet that was supposed to dominate these waters is instead hiding in Sevastopol, unable to venture into operational areas without facing Ukrainian strikes it cannot defend against. Intelligence analysts monitoring Russian naval communications detected what one official called abandonment of mission. Russian naval commanders were requesting permission to relocate vessels to ports outside the Black Sea entirely. We're arguing that continued operations in current posture would result in additional catastrophic losses. We're effectively acknowledging that the Black Sea fleet can no longer accomplish its strategic objectives. That is not a Navy preparing for counteroffensive operations. That is a Navy preparing for evacuation. When the Trump administration announced the $12.7 billion aid package Tuesday afternoon, the announcement was not delivered through routine Pentagon briefings or State Department statements. President Trump personally addressed the nation from the White House at 3:47 p.m., describing Ukraine's Black Sea victory as a turning point in the war, and declaring that American support would ensure Ukraine capitalizes fully on the breakthrough. Let me read you the key passage from Trump's statement, because this language represents a fundamental shift in American policy toward this conflict. The president declared, "What President Zelensky and the Ukrainian military accomplished this week is extraordinary. They broke Russia's naval blockade. They destroyed Russian warships. They reopened Ukrainian ports. They proved that Russian aggression can be defeated. America will ensure Ukraine has every weapon, every capability, every resource needed to finish the job." We're sending $12.7 billion in military equipment immediately because winners deserve support, and Ukraine is winning. That is not cautious diplomatic language. That is a direct American commitment to Ukrainian victory, backed by the largest aid package in the war's history. Intelligence officials monitoring international reactions to the American aid announcement report what sources describe as panic in Moscow and celebration in European capitals. Russian officials apparently expected American aid to continue at incremental levels, expected bureaucratic delays to slow weapons deliveries, expected Trump's transactional approach to limit support for Ukraine. Every expectation was wrong. European allies responded to the American aid package with coordinated announcements of their own. The United Kingdom confirmed an additional £3.2 billion in military support Tuesday evening. France announced increased weapons transfers, including advanced naval defense systems. Germany disclosed that German defense contractors have been authorized to fulfill Ukrainian orders on an expedited basis without the restrictions that previously slowed deliveries. What we're watching unfold is not just American support for Ukraine. This is coordinated Western commitment to ensuring Ukraine's Black Sea breakthrough becomes permanent, that Russian naval power never again threatens Ukrainian sovereignty, that the strategic balance in the region shifts irreversibly in Ukraine's favor. This is high-stakes geopolitics in real time. Every decision matters. Every signal is analyzed. Every move and countermove is calculated. And what the West has calculated is that Ukraine's naval success creates the opportunity to fundamentally alter the strategic landscape, to eliminate Russian naval threats permanently, to restore Ukrainian economic independence, to demonstrate that aggression against democracies fails when those democracies receive the support they need to defend themselves. Tonight, Ukrainian ports are operating. Ukrainian grain is shipping. Ukrainian naval forces control waters that Russia claimed as its own. And American weapons are flowing to ensure those achievements become permanent facts that Moscow cannot reverse. Meanwhile, President Zelensky addressed the Ukrainian people Tuesday evening in a powerful speech delivered from the deck of a Ukrainian naval vessel. He said, Russia thought they could strangle our economy, blockade our ports, control our waters forever. They were wrong. He said Ukrainian sailors, Ukrainian naval forces, Ukrainian coastal defenders proved that the Black Sea is Ukrainian, that our sovereignty extends to our maritime borders, that Russian occupation of our waters has ended. And he said to our partners who are sending weapons, sending support, sending the message that Ukrainian victory matters, we say thank you. And we promise that every weapon you send will be used to liberate our land, to defend our people, to ensure that aggression against Ukraine ends in Russian defeat. These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from a wartime leader who recognizes that Ukraine has achieved a strategic breakthrough, that Western support is surging, that the momentum is now firmly on Ukraine's side, that the question is not whether Ukraine will prevail, but how quickly Russian forces will be expelled from all occupied territories. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We're covering every major development in Ukraine's expanding operational successes. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand how dramatically the war's trajectory has shifted. And drop a comment below. Do you think Trump's massive aid package represents a permanent American commitment to Ukrainian victory, or could policy still shift? I read every comment, and I want to hear your perspective. Tonight, we've heard from intelligence officials who are now monitoring Russian attempts to relocate Black Sea fleet vessels to safer ports. They say Russian naval communications reveal serious concerns about continued operations in the Black Sea theater. They say intercepted discussions between Russian commanders suggest the fleet may be permanently relocated to avoid additional catastrophic losses. And they say Russian military planners are acknowledging that control of northwestern Black Sea waters has been lost and cannot be regained with available capabilities. What happens next will depend on what Putin does in the next 48 hours. If he attempts to restore Russian naval presence, he risks additional ship losses that Russia cannot afford. and that would further demonstrate Russian military weakness. If he accepts the loss of Black Sea control, he admits that Ukrainian forces have defeated Russian naval power, that economic blockade has failed, that strategic objectives Putin declared essential are now unachievable. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. Ukraine has broken Russia's Black Sea blockade through superior tactics and courage. Trump's administration has responded with the largest aid package in the war's history, demonstrating American commitment to Ukrainian victory. And the strategic landscape of this conflict has shifted in ways that leave Moscow scrambling for any response that might prevent complete Russian humiliation. And we will be here watching every detail as the next phase of this historic struggle unfolds.